Leave that to me.
Damn fool, I knew that you were gonna say that.
Who's the more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him?
Yo, what's going on? This is the Geeky Coach brought to you by Foolproof Entertainment Network. And tonight, or today rather, I just wanted to jump in and talk about The Mandalorian and talk about what's going on there. So we're excited. There's season 2 of The Mandalorian is probably the best thing Star Wars that's happened since Return of the Jedi. And even looking at Return of the Jedi, it may top that. We've been through kind of the prequel era, which people I think now kind of look back on and back on it fondly, especially probably the group that's about 10 years younger than me that were at that kind of prime age range as that dropped in the late 90s, early 2000s. I think that, the sequel trilogy, while I think it started off with a lot of promise, just didn't finish strong. There's a lot of opinions out there specifically about, The Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker, etc. And while I think a movie like Rogue One worked well, for every Rogue One we also had a Solo, which personally I didn't find Solo that awful, but it wasn't good. And there's been a ton of talk, about how Disney has ruined Star Wars and blah blah blah. And I'm not going to go that far. It's all right. It's not great, but it's all right. And I appreciate what they tried to do in terms of introducing new characters and bringing closure to characters that we knew and love and grew up loving, whether that was Luke, Leia, Han, Lando, etc. So I think that those were all good. But The Mandalorian Season 2 delivers on what it means to be a Star Wars fan. And you can tell that this is a movie that is made by fans and made by folks that understand the lore, understand what it means to people, understand how George Lucas told stories. I think that generally speaking, we have seen a lot from Star Wars over the last 10 years, but this is the best of it. So The Mandalorian Season 1, I was a fan, but it left a little bit to be desired. They did a great job of kind of introducing new characters. It was good that it was a separate world, and it was good that, we got to know what was affectionately known as the child or Baby Yoda or whatever, and getting to understand and see that relationship develop between him and Din Djarin, the Mandalorian. We also got introduced to characters like, Carl Weathers, Grief Karga, and Cara Dune, Gina Carano's character. And while season 1 was good from an expositionary standpoint, it kind of left a little bit to be desired in terms of story. But when we started getting into season 2, Mandalorian started delivering on everything that it means to be a Star Wars fan. They finally started connecting to canon in other areas outside of the movies. And I think that that's something that hardcore fans like myself have been craving since day one. And day one that Disney bought it. And when they said, hey, we're going to make all of this old stuff legends, but going forward, every new piece of content is going to be part of the quote-unquote canon. It's going to be part of the official storyline. And unfortunately, we just haven't seen that delivered. There's been a little bit of tie-in between things like the Clone Wars and Rebels. And the cartoons have seemed to tie into one another, but they've never tied into anything that's made it into live action. I mean, we get little nods here and there, like Rogue One, where they say General Syndulla, which is, Hera Syndulla from Rebels, etc. But we've never seen the full interconnectedness of these stories before. And starting off in season 2, episode 1, we start to see that all delivered finally. Episode 1 rather, is really focused on the introduction of Cobb Vanth. Cobb Vanth is a character that first appeared in Chuck Wendig's Aftermath series of novels. He is very much just kind of an interlude character, but for those that saw him pop up, we didn't think it was Boba Fett right away. A lot of us were hoping that it was Cobb Vanth, especially the avid kind of canon book readers. So that was really cool to kind of see that be the first take there. I think beyond that, what you started to see as the season developed is old characters from Clone Wars and Rebels being introduced in new ways to new audiences in this live action Star Wars. And that was something that was really powerful in terms of understanding, hey, this is the first time we're starting to see how big this galaxy really is, and how there is a story outside of the quote unquote Star Wars or Skywalker saga. Because in I think it's episode 3 or episode 4, we get introduced to Bo-Katan. Bo-Katan being Katie Sackhoff's character of Battlestar Galactica fame. And she drops in and is really, seeming to be trying to recover from the scourge of Mandalore. And I think we hear about that in Rebels a little bit through Sabine Wren and some of the arcs that happen there. If you haven't seen Star Wars Rebels and you really are interested in kind of the Mandalorians and what's been going on with them and kind of the original trilogy canon, there's a good opportunity to go back and watch Rebels. There's a couple of good arcs that focus around Sabine Wren, who's a member of the Rebels crew, but they go back to Mandalore and they start to talk about that a little bit and talk about the Empire's occupation there and everything. And so they go into that story and they talk a bit about really what's going on in Mandalore and what they need to do to kind of retake their homeworld and those types of things, even though the Empire's quote unquote turned it to ash. I think that, introducing Mandalorians that don't follow the way, as I think it's framed up, is, something that a lot of hardcore fans were like, well, Mandalorians take their helmets off all the time. Why is he so different? Well, we find out he's basically part of a religious sector, a cult. And I think that was a very interesting way to spin this as part of the foundlings and everything. So Bo-Katan jumps in. Bo-Katan's talking about, she can't help him, but she knows someone who can. And she, of course, directs the Mandalorian, Din Djarin, to Ahsoka Tano. And Ahsoka Tano is a unique character in the Star Wars universe. When Ahsoka Tano was first introduced in the Clone Wars movie, one of the most reviled movies, up there with like the Ewok movies from the 80s, the holiday special, you could put all those on the same book. That's how people felt about Ahsoka Tano in that Clone Wars movie. But she was a character that really got to develop throughout the Clone Wars. And again, this is a situation where you're taking a character that is fully fleshed out in animation and bringing them to a live audience for the first time, and that's risky. There's a lot of things that can go wrong there. There were a lot of people that were upset that it was Rosario Dawson and not Ashley Eckstein from the cartoon who voiced her that got that shot to bring that character to live action. But I think at the end of the day, I think Rosario Dawson did a great job with the character. I think that the introduction of Ahsoka Tano and the subsequent announcement that she's getting her own show is a big deal in the Star Wars universe. You're going to see a lot of awesome things that I think come from that. Namely, one of my favorite characters, and we talked about it on our other show, Do Fools Agree, Grand Admiral Thrawn. We hear her announce or basically threaten the educator that's there, that where is Grand Admiral Thrawn? And for those that are fans of the Rebels TV show, we know that series ends with a big time jump in a little 5-second piece where Ahsoka Tano and Sabine Wren go off to find Grand Admiral Thrawn and the other protagonists from that show, Ezra Bridger. And I think that there's a very big chance that the Ahsoka show will end up being basically the sequel to Rebels in live action, which is awesome because Ahsoka Tano is the one character now that we've seen begin her career fleshed out in animation. We've seen her kind of progress into the original trilogy timeline through Rebels, and now we're going to get to follow her story probably to its conclusion, at least as far as the Star Wars universe is concerned, in a live action series all by herself. I think that they would be dumb if they didn't bring in a number of the Rebels characters there, and we'll see what kind of happens there, because I do think that there's an opportunity to see some crossover with Bo-Katan in terms of what's going on with Mandalore. Sabine Wren, who was the other kind of Rebels crew member and was the previous owner of the Darksaber, which we'll get to here in a bit. And then this ongoing adventure of trying to find Ezra and Grand Admiral Thrawn. I mean, Grand Admiral Thrawn is one of the most beloved non-canon characters to be brought into the new canon. And while the character's a little bit different, all the beats are the same. His intelligence, his ability to dissect a culture's art and determine a military strategy, etc. And I think I think Grand Admiral Thrawn will end up being the quote-unquote big baddie over this portion of the story. What I'm curious to see is, does Grand Admiral Thrawn have any ties to the First Order? Or is Grand Admiral Thrawn kind of maintaining the Empire? Or is he off doing something with the Chiss Ascendancy? And maybe it's not the Empire that he's bringing into the fold, but it's the Chiss ascendancy coming into some of this talk. And I think that that's an exciting thing that we may get to see here over the next couple years worth of Star Wars content. And at the end of the day, that's the one that I'm most excited for. I became a big fan of Rebels probably after season 1. It got really good in season 2 and 3. And then it was phenomenal all the way through to the end. It has probably one of the most memorable Star Wars deaths of all time in terms of the death of Kanan Jarrus. So if you don't know who that is, no worries. Rebels is out there. If you've got Disney Plus, you've got access to go stream those. I think it's 4 or 5 seasons of Rebels. It may even be 6, but well worth it, because like Clone Wars, while it's a cartoon and animated, it's not geared for kids. It is a show with adult themes in terms of loss and struggle and those types of things. So after we get past that, we kind of jump around a little bit. We hit Boba Fett coming back into the fold. I think Boba Fett being reintroduced in The Mandalorian was something that I didn't know I wanted, because I was okay with Boba Fett kind of meeting his end. He's never really been a consequential character. We knew he was ruthless. We talked about him a little bit in the Clone Wars and those kind of things, but at the end of the day, he's been pretty inconsequential in the Star Wars universe outside of capturing Han Solo and delivering him to Jabba the Hutt. I like where they took his character. I like how he came back. I like how he was a potential foil that became an ally. And when you look at a bounty hunter, you expect to find, ruthless, cutthroat, blah, blah, blah. But I think that he had a sense of honor, and I think that honor among thieves was really what they kind of brought to the forefront with him. And plus, how cool is it that Slave One got reintroduced, especially when they did the unthinkable and blew up the the Clone Wars gunship. I mean, the Razor Crest. That ended up being a great arc, and it kind of set us on this final journey. With the final journey, seeing Grogu and his story introduced. Ahsoka basically said, I can't train him. He's too attached to you. And seeing that, it was interesting because Ahsoka knows what attachment can do. So for those that don't know, and this is something I should have brought up during the Ahsoka section, so apologies there, but Ahsoka was the Padawan of Anakin Skywalker. As Anakin's Padawan, she saw the darkness rising in him. She saw the attachment to Padme. She saw how that could disrupt things. She actually leaves the Jedi Order at the end of the Clone Wars. And I think that that's why she says that she can't train him. She doesn't believe that she's a Jedi. I think that she is what a lot of fans would refer to as a gray Jedi. And while I don't necessarily like the term gray Jedi, I understand what people mean. And that's to be able to say that, sometimes you need to have peace and serenity and those attributes, and then there are other times where it does call for raw emotion. It does call for letting the dark side in. It's to what ends, and do you let it consume you, that matters. And I think that that's a theme that Star Wars, in terms of the main canon, has never really touched on. And I mean, we see it with Luke in Return of the Jedi, where he comes out swinging against Vader when Vader mentions his sister, mentions Leia. And there's a lot of folks, myself included, who believe that he turned at that point. But he managed to kind of walk to the edge and come back and cast aside the saber, and kind of how he finishes out that story. I think similarly that's what you see with Ahsoka, and when she says that she can't train him, and she gives Din Djarin kind of the instructions to help Grogu go find other Jedi. I mean, there were a lot of people, myself included, who didn't think that I thought that would be the climax of the series. Instead, they're right there the next episode, and that's what this show did a great job of this season. They kept the plot moving. There really were, outside of maybe, I think it was episode 2, The Journey, or the Passenger, where they take the frog lady to her new home. Outside of that, there weren't a ton of inconsequential side quests. I mean, after we get introduced to Boba Fett, we go find Bill Burr's character and bring him back into the fold. And we see what it's like to be a member of the Empire, and kind of how the Empire is struggling these days. And Burr really goads that Imperial officer into into letting his emotions boil up. And that ends up with kind of the coolest gunfight of the show. So as we, travel from Typhon and Grogu using the Force to send out the big beacon, the light in the sky, blah blah blah. We move into that Bill Burr sequence in that Bill Burr episode, and for as much as Bill Burr has talked about how he hates Star Wars, he was a great addition this season. I was kind of mixed feelings on him in the first season, but the way his character was portrayed in season 2 and how they end up basically just letting him go at the end of the season, I thought that was really cool, and I thought they did a great job with that, especially since it was a, hey, you're ex-Imperial, you can get us in. He's like, no, I'm not doing that. And they basically threatened him into it, and then they let him go at the end. I thought that was very kind of Star Wars-esque. And then the season finale. I mean, what can you say about the season finale? It was incredible. The best half hour, 45 minutes of Star Wars content, maybe outside of the third act of Rogue One. You got everything there except maybe Space Battle. Space Battle might have been the only other thing you wanted to see, and you even got that at the beginning of the episode where the Mandalorian's crew in Slave One basically hijacks the Imperial shuttle with the Doctor on it, and the Doctor, who looks like a knockoff version of Dr. Bashir from Star Trek DS9, exposes everything. He's like, well, he's there, and that's what you need to do, and that's what he's trying to do. And I think what we'll end up learning is that Grogu's blood may actually be kind of the missing element in terms of the M count that was needed to bring back the Clone Emperor. And I think that that's really where the Gideon storyline goes. So they hijack the shuttle. They make their way to the ship. They really just kind of blast their way through. And honestly, they make it through kind of easier than I thought they would. The quick battle between the Dark Troopers, or the one Dark Trooper and Din Djarin, was a good little battle sequence. We saw the Beskar come into play, etc. We also saw, how destructive those Dark Troopers could be. Shout out to the Dark Troopers, bringing Dark Troopers back. I played Dark Forces and Dark Forces 2 and Jedi Knight and Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy and all those mid to late 90s computer games. That's where a lot of that stuff originated, even though it just felt like, Cylons or whatnot. It was a great callback. You've got the whole crew storming the ship with Cara and the two Mandalorians, Sasha Banks, which I'm still not buying her yet, but Katie Sackhoff as Bo-Katan is phenomenal, and just the way that they kind of stormed through the ship. The only one that I wish had maybe made an appearance, but it makes sense why she didn't, since she's got her own show, is Ahsoka. But you saw a lot of good there, and Fennec, Ming-Hua's character, also kind of laying down the law and taking their way through that shuttle. And so eventually they all end up in kind of the command center as the Dark Troopers are coming back. They're confronting Gideon, and the Dark Troopers are banging through the door. This show has done a great job of paying homage to a bunch of different genres, and this little horror element that they thought they put through with them banging on the door is, Gideon's basically expositioning us to death around what he wants and what he thinks and about the New Order and blah, blah, blah. And then we see the X-Wing fly by in the background. And I am not going to lie, I was one of those people that thought it was the New Republic. I thought the New Republic was showing up, and the New Republic was basically, they were going to capture Gideon and take that to kind of its natural conclusion. And then you see the scene from Rogue One with a green lightsaber instead of a red lightsaber. I mean, if you look at the way that scene was shot, it's the same scene. Instead of throwing the guy up into the wall, he pushes him inside. Instead of choking him, he just crushes the droid. And that was the Luke Skywalker everybody wanted to see. That was the Luke Skywalker that we were hoping to get in The Last Jedi. We were hoping to get in Rise of Skywalker that we never got the chance to see again. And I've pitched this idea 1,000 times, and they'll never do it. But the way to give fans what they want with Luke Skywalker is to do a Knights of the Old Republic style game starring Luke, building up the Jedi Academy, starting right after Return of the Jedi, inserting this scene with Grogu, inserting the scene from Battlefront where he collects the compass, and have the game finish with his confrontation with Kyle Kylo Ren, which is outlined in The Last Jedi. And I think if you could do that and make it I don't want to say choose your own adventure, because I think it would still be a linear story, but if you could choose how you approach certain quests, everybody could get the Luke Skywalker that they wanted. Everybody could, tell their own story with Luke, and it could all still be quote unquote canon. I think that that's the only way that you could do that and make folks happy. They'll never do it, and it's an idea I've pitched around, and it just won't ever happen. But Luke comes in, wrecks shop, and then he basically gives the Mandalorian the choice and tells him that, hey, he wants to come with, or he should, I am here to train him. He is looking for your permission. And you can tell that there's already that connection between Grogu and Luke. And of course, at the end, Grogu goes with Luke. We see the Mandalorian remove his helmet, see Din Djarin's face, Pedro Pascal for the second time this season. I don't think you'll see him behind the mask a whole ton of a lot going forward, but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this was the best piece of Star Wars content we've gotten since the acquisition by Disney, and it's the first time we've seen characters cross over from animation to live action. So with all of that, that's really my thoughts on it. Let me know what you think. Drop a comment, shoot me a note. I'm always geeked out about Star Wars. I'd love to do just kind of a live chat along in the future, doing something like this, but schedules aren't always great and we've got a lot going on. But I appreciate you stopping by. If you're stopping by watching the video, click like, click subscribe, all that good stuff, share. I appreciate it. And with that, peace out, fools.
Leave that to me.
Damn fool, I knew that you were gonna say that.
Who's the more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him?